Welcome everybody to the Serpent Tarot for the first of a 12-part series of pick a card readings that are going to be called You Through the Houses, because they're looking at the nature of each of the houses in the astrological chart and what are the key aims, dreams, aspirations, issues, challenges, etc. they may be presenting to you at the moment to fully actualize and enjoy the energies of those particular houses. And the structure of how these particular readings are going to go is that I will, in the first part of this introduction, which I do suggest you listen to, I'm going to have a bit of a talk about the nature of the first house in this case, and in all the videos I'll talk about the particular house we're talking about. That gives a broad context, which I will then go into in a little bit more detail when I describe what's going to happen in the readings in the pile selection part of the video. There'll then be a second part of the introduction, which you may or may not want to stay for. It really depends upon your interest in astrology, the information you have, and whether or not you think it will add value or nuance to the readings. And that's a bit where I'm going to go through what different signs in the first house mean, because depending upon when you were born, the time of birth, as well as the place and date, you may have the same rising sign as the sign that owns the house, which is Aries in this case, or you may in fact have a different sign there, because it depends upon what sign was effectively on the horizon at your place of birth and time of birth. So depending upon that, you may either, if you had an Aries ascendant, have a double dose of what the Aries house is all about, or you may in fact have almost an overlay with the energies of whatever sign is there. So I want to go through what the signs mean so that you have that nuance if you know that in your chart. So, and I also want to go through what it means to have planets in that house as well too, because that might give some extra information as well, an extra context for you. So if you're an astrologer, you probably don't need to listen to that second part of the introduction, because you would know this. It's going to be pretty high level. But if you're not, and you have a copy of your chart, or you know the day, the date, the time and the place of your birth, you can go to various free websites that can actually give you that information. It just might add a little bit of nuance to whatever reading you do. It does not mean you have to know that to get something out of this reading. You can choose your pile, as always, intuitively, take the messages that resonate for you, leave the rest and so forth. You can go to more than one pile, all of those kind of things. But I'm just wanting to give that extra context around this, because I think it can add nuance if you know that about your chart to whatever you've chosen. So the first part of the introduction, as I say, that it's worth staying for, is just a little bit about the first house. So as I say, the first house is the house which has your ascendant. It's the rising sign at your time and place of birth. And because it's owned by Aries, there's almost a saying for Aries that really sums it up, which is I am. So Aries is forward thinking, Aries is ambitious, Aries wants to express itself, Aries has a lot of energy and so forth, and it is very much in the world. And this is really what the first house is about. The first house is how you are seen by others, how you present in the world. As the title of this suggests, your personal power of presence. How do people see you? It's often, in fact, your rising sign is a little bit more of an indication of what your physical looks are like than, in fact, what your sun sign is, unless your sun happens to be in the first house as well. So it's really how people see you. And so the nature of this particular inquiry that we're looking at, where we want to delve deep in this, is really what you would like to project to others and what you are projecting to others at the moment, and what questions and energies and focus and detail might help with Spirit's guidance to close any gap that might be there, or to accentuate the things that are working in harmony between those two sort of things, or even to work out if what you want to be is more the case in certain aspects of your life, but in other aspects of your life, like work, for instance, it may not be working as simply. So to give you an example of that, somebody who has a lot of charisma, for instance, so somebody who maybe has a fire sign in the first house That would be quite commonly the case. Can find that charisma and how that projects to other people has different impacts in different types of relationships. So somebody may be incredibly powerful and successful and even a star on the stage, but that could actually add complications to personal relationships. I once worked for someone who was very charismatic, and I really liked the way he worked because he would bring you in, give you a sense of yourself, give you the resources you need, and then he left you alone to do what you wanted to do. And I like that sort of thing because I like my freedom. But he did that with everyone, and not everyone wanted to be left alone. A lot of people, because of the charisma he had, wanted to continue to have that attention. But he sort of said, well, this is the way I work and this is the way I empower people. And it didn't always work for people. And in the end, some people really responded badly when they felt that they were no longer being paid attention to by the sun, so to speak. So everything has its potential complications. So we're just wanting to look for that kind of thing between your general life, your love relationships, and your kind of career and vocation and so forth, how that is impacted by how you come across to others, how you want to come across to others. So that's really what we're going to be looking at today. And that's what the house is all about, who you are in the world on a very general level. So to get into the more detailed area, so at this point I'm going to put a timestamp in to talk about the astrology in more detail. I want to first of all have a talk about what the different signs in the first house mean. Okay, so as I said, if you have Aries in the first house, so in its natural home, its natural habitat, you've got a very strong instinctual nature, very strong connection between your passions and your ego. You do find it very easy to be assertive. Some people may find it aggressive. I don't think that you would see it that way. It's assertion, but as you know, I'm sure if you've had Aries in the first house, you've experienced some people finding your assertion and your openness and your drive as being a bit aggressive at times, even if that isn't your intent and isn't really technically what's happening at all. Your main challenges can be around tact, bringing things into equity because you're so ambitious and have so much drive, and getting the other person's point of view, like looking from the other perspective. If you have Taurus in the first house, you like earthly pleasures, your search for love and hedonism and all of those sort of things are very clearly on display. You enjoy life. People see that you enjoy life, that you also want some security around it. You want to have a comfortable lifestyle. You want to have material benefits and so forth. You're likely to be well built, strong, a bit slow to change. If you have Gemini in the first house, you're restless, you're very focused on the spoken word, very quick mind, fast, can often be thin, sort of like that sense of nervous energy and so forth. But you can have difficulty focusing on one thing at a time because you have sort of such a breadth of intellectual curiosity. For Cancer, if that's in your first house, you're very focused on home, family. You're very sensitive, but strong. It's not a sensitivity that makes you weak. You're very, very protective, and people see you as a protective energy. You have a very strong genetic connection to how you look. So, in fact, it's not necessarily that you would look Cancerian as such. It's more that you're likely to look like people who were in your family, in one line of your family, or some amalgam of both parental lines, potentially. You may in fact be one of those people who looks a lot like an aunt or an uncle or a grandfather or something like that. You are very directed by the moon. You're very, very emotionally directed. You're someone who would clearly change their moods and emotions, particularly around things like moon cycles and so forth. If you have Leo in the first house, then there is an ego issue, a wanting to be on center stage. And, depending upon what's in your chart, that may either be something you feel very natural with, or it might be something that you battle internally with because there might be other aspects of your chart that suggest you prefer not to be always in the limelight. So you could potentially have Leo in the first house and be someone who people want to put on center stage, but you might have many of your planets in the lower half of the chart, and that tends to be someone who's a little bit more introverted and retiring. So there could be a thing there, and if you do want to be center stage, you definitely want to be center stage, and people know it, and you will probably be in competition with other people who want the limelight as well. You're very brave. You are likely to have a strong physique. very warm, very loyal, probably very good looking, and sometimes, because of the looks, could be a little bit vain. Don't have to be, but could be a little bit vain. But I think you would be very, very much wanting to have a sort of dramatic and clear physical presence, and the way that you look would matter to you. You're very individual and you can be a bit rebellious. If you have Virgo in the first house, you're very helpful, you're very structured, you're likely to have a very fine physique, very, very, great, a six-pack potentially if you're a guy, sort of very, very lean and elegant, sort of almost ballerina-esque type of body potentially if you're a woman, that kind of thing. So you're very strong around your beliefs, you have a focus on healing and health, and you're very intelligent and clear about what you do, but very structured. Everything around you would have its place. If you have Libra in the first house, you're really looking for yourself and your balance through others. Libra is the social sign above all others. And so if it's in your first house, how you find yourself is partly through the social groups that you're involved in, the connections that you make, and that sort of thing. You're likely to be impeccably dressed, impeccably put together, very polite, very able to move in all sorts of levels of society and all sort of like different cultural backgrounds and so forth. Your biggest thing is you're always looking for balance and harmony. So the challenge may be sometimes to show the face that you need to show when you need to say something that isn't going to be as well received, or when you need to argue, to be able to feel comfortable with constructive conflict can be a challenge for Libra in the first house. For Scorpio in the first house, you're likely to be very material, very strong and intense and focused and determined. You might scare people a bit. Scorpio in the first house can be a little bit too intense sometimes for other people. It's not necessarily too intense for you, but for other people. You're also very sensitive and emotional, but I think that you know how to hide that. And I think Scorpio would know how to project the power more than the sensitivity, because all Scorpios have a very strong sense of both those sides of their nature. You could have dark features. It's often the case that you have piercing, intense eyes, intense gaze. In general, you can be very intense, sometimes possessive, sometimes obsessive. So it's just something to be, or you could come across as that, even in fact that's not the case. So remembering that the first house is how you come across to others. For Sagittarius in the first house, you could be physically large. That doesn't necessarily mean overweight or anything, just likely to be quite sturdy, quite big, maybe big bones. You have very strong convictions, very freedom focused, very philosophical. Not always that practical though. For you, it's all about the new ideas, the moving forward, the moving quickly and so forth. People may find it a little bit hard to get you to pin down to something. They may feel you're going to be here one day and gone the next and so forth. You may literally be known as someone who travels a lot and that sort of thing. If you have Capricorn in your first house, you're very practical, very material, likely to be very connected to the powers of the world at whatever level you're at. You naturally fit well with business, you naturally fit well with government, politics, all of that kind of thing. Very likely to be successful in life. Physically likely to have very strong bones. You're also not likely to come across as all that emotional. You may well have many other emotional markers in your chart, but the way that people see you is kind of all business, all practical, all outcomes focused. If you have Aquarius in the first house, you adapt really well to different social milieu. You are very much able to be chameleon-like if you want, but you can also come across as eccentric. So you're either going to be able to fit in and float and glide between any type of environment, a bit like Libra can, or you're going to appear to be always the quirky, different, future-focused person compared to everybody else. Physically, Aquarius rising is often tall and a bit etheric, a little bit sort of like otherworldly looking, and you're not authority focused on any level, you're philosophically focused. So you probably don't really connect in or even completely understand power games around you, and when people want to engage with you on that level, you really want to be looking at the philosophy and the bigger picture and the utilitarian outcomes of things. Then finally, if you have Pisces in the first house, you're on a mission of some sort, likely a spiritual or philosophical mission, a higher cause. People see you as that, as someone who's very emotional, very sensitive, maybe a little bit mentally nervous and fidgety, or kind of a little bit tense sometimes, but that's just the energy, the emotional energy that you're processing and so forth. People may see you as a little bit dreamy and otherworldly, different in a way to Aquarius. Aquarius is otherworldly almost in an alien, David Bowie-esque type of way, whereas Pisces is more the sort of emotional, dreamy, Miss of Avalon, Tolkien-esque elves type of thing, if that makes sense, as a kind of a look and a feeling that comes off them. Okay, so let's have a look then also at what happens if you have planets in the first house. Okay, firstly, if you have the sun in the first house, and the sun is the planet that you are moving towards, something that is part of your life path for your life, it does suggest that the elements of the first house, which is expressing yourself in the world, is part of your life path. You are meant to be seen in some way. You identify strongly with your image, the image that you present, and you definitely always make an impression. You have presence naturally. In some way you will need to lead or be an innovator. What you have to make sure of is, because your sun shines so bright, not to be overbearing or intimidating for others. If your moon is in the first house, your emotions are kind of shown in a way very openly. You'd be an incredible actor potentially in being able to emote and express pretty much on cue. You also could potentially wear your heart on your sleeve. You will come across as very nurturing and caring of others, but a little bit moody sometimes. With Mercury in the first house, you're likely to be a bit restless, very adaptable, quick, versatile, again, very communication oriented. You will probably really like to talk, really like to think things through. Probably you're one of those sort of people that when you're sorting out something for who you want to be in the world and how you want to present yourself, you want to be able to be the person who speaks, who tells your story. You may talk a lot, in fact. You can be a bit mischievous and precocious, very curious. It's a very good sign for a comedian or something like that to have Mercury in the first house. Venus in the first house, you're very likable, very magnetic, very attractive, likely to be very beautiful physically, charming, diplomatic, stylish, like it's all over the shop in terms of really beautiful characteristics that people admire. It could bring with it some jealousy. So when you have Venus in the first house, you may be someone who attracts jealousy for all those qualities that you very clearly show to the world. Mars in the first house makes you commanding, a leader. It's like the sun in a way, but it's really action oriented. You're quick to react. You're very dynamic. Again, a bit like Aries, because of course Mars and Aries are connected. You may find that you are sometimes a little bit, or could be seen as being a little bit aggressive as opposed to assertive. That's one of the things you need to balance, and not to be too rash. You have impressive energy and stamina, and you're really independent. If you have Jupiter in the first house, you're jovial, you're kind, you're well-meaning, you're altruistic, you're probably the epitome of the benefits of positive thinking, and probably extremely good at things like the law of attraction and manifestation. You'd be one of the naturals who actually could do that and could present that. You're very principled as well. People would trust you fairly innately. With Saturn in the first house, you might come across as a bit stern sometimes. You're very moral, so it's a bit like Jupiter, but it's like the sort of grandparent of Jupiter in a way, if that makes sense. Very moral, responsible, and you find it a little bit hard to put yourself first. So that's interesting when you have it in the first house, because you're meant to do that to some extent. So a way to navigate that may be to think about how the structures and disciplines you put in your life and you exemplify as a role model become something that is of value to others. For Uranus in the first house, you're very freedom oriented. In fact, you'll demand freedom, and people will have that sense. It's a bit like the Sagittarius feeling that people might sometimes think you may be gone any minute. They've got to grab your attention now if they're going to get it. You dress and look a bit quirky. You can assert yourself when necessary because you're out to change the world, but you can be a bit erratic. You are the natural change agent, but whether you're the person who then stays to see through the new regime is another matter. It may be that you're the sort of person who comes to stir everything up, and then you move on to the next area that's got stagnant. If you have Neptune in the first house, you're artistic, you're dreamy, very sensitive to the environment, chameleon-like, likely to be psychic and come across as a bit fey and psychic, peace-loving. Your allure, which is real, and your intrigue, which is real, is sort of subtle. It kind of has a different say to something like Scorpio. Scorpio sort of energy is sort of very intense and in your face with its sort of depths. You have equal depths, but it's subtle. It's a quieter allure in a way. For Pluto in the first house, there's all the intensity, very strong. Again, you can be intimidating with Pluto. They're very powerful, very, very private. People cannot get past your boundaries, but that makes you intriguing. But again, a bit more like the Scorpio intriguing than, say, the Neptunian intriguing I was just talking about. You look very deeply into things and people know that. They understand it. They think you have, in a sense, the keys to some great mysteries. Whether or not you actually do, that's the way you come across. And lastly, using an asteroid, the asteroid Chiron, which often shows some wounds that one heals from childhood or early in life. When you have Chiron in the first house, you're on a journey of self-discovery. You may have been very withdrawn in childhood, or you might have had to fight to be noticed in some way. You need to find personal meaning in existence. You can't just have here for a good time. You are here for a meaningful time. So those are all the planets and as I say, the asteroid in the first house. So now we're going to move to the pile selection part of the video. And what I should have probably said is that if there are any astrologers who are listening to this and have anything else, any other nuance that they'd like to add, please do in the comments below, because all of that will add to the learning and the nuance that anybody who is coming here and coming to the reading will get from the reading if you share that. So please don't feel that this isn't your video so you can't do it. I'd really love to hear that. Okay, so pile choice. So as I said right at the beginning, one of the things I'm going to do with this particular series is I'm going to have 4 choices each time, and I'm going to be representing them with the number of the minor arcana, or with a major arcana if I think it's a better representation, for the different elements. For those who do know what their rising sign is, what their first house is, it may make it easy to make the choice, because for instance, if you had a fire sign rising, so Aries or Sagittarius or Leo, you may use that to decide that this first reading, which has the Ace of Wands from the Flight of Fantasy Tarot, is the right reading for you. But do not feel constrained by that, because I do not know what cards are underneath these, so I don't know whether or not that's really ultimately going to reflect things that are fire related. What I have put into the intention of this is to get some connection between that, but not so strongly that people need to know their sign to be able to choose the pile. So I'm trusting Spirit to get the nuance and the subtlety of that for us in this reading. So as I say, that may help you choose, or it may be that you like the Flights of Fantasy Tarot or this particular image, or you might usually like to choose pile number 1. I'll just put down the numbers for those that like to see that visually. For pile number 2, I'm using the Ace of Coins, so from the Somnia Tarot, so the Pentacles, so the Earth signs, if that is something that you know or you feel drawn to. You may feel drawn to them even if you don't know what your first house is. For pile 3, I have the Wisdom of the Unknown Tarot with the Ace of Swords for the air signs. And for pile 4, I have the Crystal Unity Tarot with the Ace of Cups for the water signs. So as I say, it may help you choose. You shouldn't just go by it if that doesn't resonate for you. Really go to the pile that calls to you, and if you feel called to more than one, by all means go to more than one. The interesting thing, actually I should say, in astrology, depending upon how your chart is set up, there are different ways, there are different sort of traditions. There are equal house, which it's the same degree on the ascendant, and then on the second house, third house, fourth house, which will always mean that it's pretty much the one sign. But in others, you may have a couple of signs straddling potential houses more clearly and so forth. So just depends on how the chart is set up and how it looks. So be aware of that. That's why don't be too constrained by this, but if that helps you choose, then by all means use that as a way to choose. Whatever way works for you, and as I say, more than one reading may call to you. When you know which one you want to go to or ones you want to go to, as always, the timestamps are in the description box below, and I'll see you there. Welcome, pile one, to your reading. So this side here is to represent how you see yourself in terms of what you want to project to the world using the powers of your first house. And this is what is being projected at the moment, so that we can look at how much that connects, where there might be differences or issues or challenges, etc., in you being seen the way that you want to be seen, and what is really going on between your internal view of yourself and the external projection of yourself. The first thing I would say for you is that I think there's actually quite a strong synergy. There are some differences, which we will get into, but I think there is quite a strong synergy between how you see yourself and how you and how you think you project yourself into the world, and what other people are experiencing from you. So I think for a start, that's good. There's a lot more challenge when things are at odds, I think. So I think that you are very self-aware in many ways, but I think what you do is that some of your motives you keep very private, and people maybe misunderstand the motives. So the experience of you is very much aligned with who you are. Also, I think where your drive comes from is not as clear to other people, but the experience of it comes out the same. So why I say that is that there are some very strong energies for you around. Here we have sacred sexuality, here we have the goddess Ketesh, which is around pleasure, and then there is visionary and a sort of sense of unity and so forth that can come from an Aquarian viewpoint. So it feels to me, I'll get to this later, it feels to me like a large part of your self-image is about understanding the broader issues around relationship, around how we express our love natures in particular, about the connection between that side of our natures and our spiritual aspirations, and wanting to make that as inclusive as possible, as future focused as possible, and to ultimately have an altruistic outcome. I think that many of the people who come here, a really natural expression of your first house would be being somebody who is a leader around how people understand and accept themselves in terms of what gives them pleasure, what makes them feel connected, the unity principle, and so forth. And that is seen by other people. You have Dionysus here, so ecstasy. I think you're very attractive. I think that many people probably fall in love with you, whether you know it or not, and you may not know it. I think you're a little bit more in your head and your soul. But a lot of people, I think, find you very attractive, but they also find you incredibly unifying and prepared to go into the battles. This is why I say I think many of you, a very strong expression of your first house would be to have a cause to help with diversity and inclusion and acceptance and all of those sort of things. It may very well be that that has come from suffering from being different when you were younger, but it could also be with you because you are very connected internally to other people with Aquarius, and on a larger scale, a kind of spiritual and intellectual scale, that it's just that you've observed it. Like, I don't think there's many people who only really understand something as a problem or something that has to be changed when it personally affects them. I don't think you're like that. I think that you have principles around this. You will see things that you want to have that are better and so forth, and that drives you. And it is about the pure expression of love, connection, intimacy, joy, and the spirit. The song of the heart really is what I'm getting. Some of you might be quite musical, I'm getting, actually, as well, interestingly enough. And that might be part of it. Some of you may be expressing it and it's seen that way, but what you do is very, very unifying. It's not just about having the good time. It's about making sure everybody can have the good time, and that in understanding the nuances of that, you actually create unity and you transmute and change things. But the thing that's different between the two is that you are coming very much from the spirit and from a sense of altruism with Prometheus. So Prometheus, if you're not familiar, was the god who gave mankind fire. And the other gods weren't very impressed with the fact that mankind had fire. So they tied poor Prometheus to a cliff and had, I think it was a raven or a hawk or something like that, some sort of bird come, it might have been a vulture, come and eat out, I think it was his liver every day, and it would regenerate and it would happen again. So they were a little bit cruel, the gods, in the way that they dealt with people that they thought had given, uppity humans something that they shouldn't have. But that's why he's such a symbol of altruism. And so you are coming from that. You are coming from a sense of wanting to do good. But I think some people, and it may be the way you express this, see it as much about you, like about your personal brand in some way. You may literally do it through performance. As I said, I got a sense of music around some of you. Some of you may be musicians or working in the performing arts in some way. You are definitely a high achiever. And because people see this in you and you are able to change things, you do a breakthrough on some level with things. I think people may think it's more about you and your beliefs than it really is. I mean, it is about your beliefs and it is about you, but it's like this is a kind of almost a Leonian look at me type feeling, whereas this, as I say, is a more Aquarian, detached, or maybe Piscean, I think. Or if you did listen to the introduction, the second part of the introduction, that sort of Jupiter in the first house, sort of a sense of a kind of a generosity of spirit and having a purpose and so forth. Same thing with Neptune in the first house. So I think that's the only real issue for you. And it doesn't necessarily have to be one that gets in the way of what you're trying to achieve, but you could be misunderstood. There could be people who you are very, very sincere, but they think it's a bit of an act. So you may, as I say, and it could be in anything, you don't have to be in the performing arts, but there is something about you that is a bit on centre stage, a bit Leonian in the way that other people see it, and you could draw a little bit of jealousy for that reason. But I think one of the things, the challenges that you may have over time is making clear to people that you are using yourself as a means to communicate this, and as an example maybe, not as something to get more out of it yourself. Because that, if you don't, that will get in the way of the unity and the transmuting of energy that was disunifying. So to get to the core of what you're trying to do, you need to be aware of how that's coming across. So we also had some astrology cards under this. So I'm just going to put a couple for each just to see if that gives us any more nuance about the difference. And then we've got the Stories Oracle, which has some questions, and that's to ask some questions as a bridge to help sort of unify the two sides of this. So firstly, around the way you see yourself and the way other people see you. Oh, yeah, okay. That's very much showing exactly what I'm talking about. So over here for you, you have set your intentions, you know what you're doing. I feel like you don't think you have to explain it. I think you feel like it's all very clear. And to the degree that you have to talk about it with the Gemini thing, you have the gift of the gab. You're able to explain your sort of concepts really, really well. But I think you keep some of it, as I say, private. So there's almost like you're a fantastic PR merchant for the cause, but not necessarily for yourself. Because over here, the way it's coming across is a combination of the 10th house and the second house. The second house is all about values, possessions, money, material outcomes. And the 10th house is about who you are in the world, in a career. So I think many of you are using this energy in your career, and people think it's about the career rather than thinking about what the cause is here. Now, you may not be concerned about that. You might be happy enough with it, or you may feel a little bit misunderstood. And as I say, there could be times and in certain circumstances where that misunderstanding may start to affect you being able to bring about the very sincerely held change for the better that you want to bring into the world. So let's see what Stories Oracle has. So this is an oracle that has constellations and questions with them. So I'm just going to read you the questions because they're a little bit hard to read on screen. And they're the questions to think about in this connection. And then we're going to go into the tarot to look at how this side, how your first house is manifesting in general terms in your love relationships and then in your career. So the questions to Bridget. Firstly, we have links. And it says, what if you consciously decided to feel into all the magic in the world around you? So I think that's saying the magic, and there is magic to you. There is magic to what Prometheus did. There's something sacred about what you do. Feeling more into that and maybe projecting it more into the world might help with how you're coming across. And the other one is Draco. Okay, so what if all you needed to be was yourself? So I think this is picking up you. It is within your control if you want to bridge this in general terms. As I say, we will look at it with the tarot for the different aspects of your life. But I think what this is saying in combination is that you can feel into the world. You can see into the world. This is the Aquarian thing. This is the visionary. Use that sort of energy to present it and then be yourself and be the role model of it. Less as a performer and an achiever, though I don't think there's any problem if it then becomes part of your career, but it's in living it and living it totally and maybe being a little bit more open to what you're doing as well. You don't have to give away all your secrets or all your private space and so forth, but something that like makes it clear that this is genuine. It's not a brand. This is not a personal brand. This is genuine. Okay, very interesting. So let's have a look at, we're going to ask Tarot for 3 cards each. One for one lot of 3 for how you're being seen in general, how your first house is operating for you in general. Then we're going to ask for how it is in love relationships, and then thirdly in career and vocation. So firstly, the general gist of how you come across. And I'll shuffle again for love and relationships, which will be important to this energy because there's a lot about this. Oh, and that's not surprising. And then lastly, around your career, where I think a lot of this energy I think is going to be around career or vocation. So 7 of Cups. Okay, so in general terms, how people are seeing you is good with all of this, regardless of some of the potential risks around the brand. I think for most part, even with that, people still think you're genuine and people still want to follow you. You are very, very attractive to people and you are seen as an alternative to the powers of the world at the moment and the ideas of the world. You are a new ideas person and someone who can bring people out of the shadows. So with the Emperor reversed here, I think that's operating very, very positively here. It's often a card when reversed that is about power that is misused, but that's not the energy at all. It is in any of this reading. This is really telling me that you are seen by others as a new way of thinking about power, about the structure of the world, and as I say, things like diversity, inclusion, acceptance, and so forth. You may well, as I say, this may be partly you living out what you do. So you may be gender fluid, you may have sort of like the more minority areas of potential preference or whatever. It could be something like that. So you literally are coming across as an example of that, who is still very private. So there is something about you that intrigues everybody because you aren't showing everything. You are private, but I think you're out enough if you are, in fact, an example of what you're trying to demonstrate here to make it clear you are that. You're not hiding anything on that level. You're just not going into telling everybody then, your shoe size and, your patterns of work and whatever it might be. You keep a lot of stuff private, but you are quite clear about who you are in this space that you're working in, or you are an alternative power figure or are going to be an alternative power figure in a world that is more accepting, I think. So what that means for your personal relationships, we have the Lovers and then we have the Page of Wands reversed and the Ace of Pentacles reversed. One of the things that could happen with this, because you are so altruistic, remember, and you are so a kind of Aquarian and visionary and detached, is that in your love relationships, you may not always pursue the relationships that you're really drawn to. You may be more in love with the idea of love rather than actually actualizing it in some way, or you may find it hard to find the right partner. And some of this may connect to the energy of whether people fully understand you. So if you are somebody who's in a position of power around this, or you're a bit of an icon in some way for this, the sort of differences and diversity and so forth, you do need to be aware that that could cause people to feel a little bit overwhelmed and a little bit unsure, and not even sure whether you belong to a relationship or whether you're about all relationships in some way. You could be someone who, for a career, does something around sort of therapy and helping people with these sort of issues, or you may be, as I say, on the stage, a celebrity in some way, and someone that people think they can't ever have belong to them. So I think that you become a bit iconic about love, and as a result of that, one of the issues could be for you around you finding somebody and people feeling comfortable that they could be with you, that you're not too far, you're not out of their league or something like that. Because you do come across very much as an achiever, remember, and the performance side of things may make people feel, what bit is there for me, particularly if you don't show a lot to start with, which I suspect is the case. So that's one challenge of the way you're seen, the way you come across, and what you're trying to do. The other challenge is around getting the right image in your career. With the Seven of Cups there, you could be the ideal to everybody, or you could be misunderstood. And I think with the Five of Cups reversed and the Nine of Wands reversed, I think that you often feel misunderstood in your career, and you often feel like you have to be very careful about what you say and what you do with the Nine of Wands. It may in fact sometimes mean that you move away from work positions or businesses or whatever it might be, or if you are something like an actor or a singer, this just might be that there's a lot of change around that. It's just the nature of the business, and lots of different opportunities. But I do think for many of you, this is the challenge of this plays out in your personal relationships, like love relationships, and in your career, because more generally, people who are friends, people who are watching you, people who are admirers, they just sort of see you as someone who's a bit intriguing, but someone who is a role model that is something to aspire to. But in love relationships, it may make it hard to find the right person and or to have that person feel able to be with you. And you are misunderstood, I think, around your intent and your motives, because they're very pure and actually quite self-sacrificial as well. So that may be sort of an issue that you're dealing with. So I also wanted to use some other oracles around the general, the love and the career before we close out with sort of energy advice to sort of get the shift where you need it and to really maximize what you get out of the first house. So firstly, a couple of cards around how to come across, or what to think about in this more general way of how your first house is operating. So we have brown. Okay, so I think what this is saying is that you come across as a combination of fire and air, really, maybe with a bit of Scorpio thrown in. You're an interesting mix in terms of the astrological energies here, but I think it is saying one of the things that can help you is to emphasize your warmth, because you are a naturally very warm person. And to make that part of your general routine and how you come across, you don't have to, and be very consistent, because I do think that you will be aspirational to people. And I think because of that, people may wonder whether they can reach you, whether you're going to be there, whether you're there for them, or whether you're just there for the collective. So having this sort of natural warmth and focusing on routine and consistency and people feeling they can rely on you to be there, I think will be helpful in people understanding this isn't about you just being a big show off. This is about you trying to make a major change that helps people. Okay, let's pull a couple of cards from the Heart Code Oracle relationship deck for the love relationship. What advice Spirit has around that. Oh, okay, so we've got Twin Flame. And we've got Expectations. Okay, so some of that reverse energy may be that some of you are in a twin flame, and a twin flame is often quite a significant but tricky relationship. It would be particularly so for someone like you who has almost a cause around, as I say, diversity, inclusion, acceptance, tolerance, all of those sort of things, and you're kind of there in a way for the whole world. But the twin flame energy is very, very personal. And so I think you're going to probably have, if not a twin flame, then a very powerful relationship like that at some stage in your life if you don't already have it. And it may be one of the things that triggers some of the expectations and really brings this to the surface. It may be that many of you have been used to being attractive to others but not necessarily having the long-term relationship because you feel like you're always doing the work, whether it be sort of career, creativity, performance, or whether it's the work around this cause that you have. But I think a major relationship is going to be the thing that really makes you start to understand the difference between how you are trying to do what you're trying to do and be a peer and the expectations it's creating in other people, plus potentially limitations. So it's a good thing it comes along if it hasn't already, but if it hasn't already, then maybe take on board this to the degree that it resonates for you, because it may be helpful in being ready for this major relationship. Now down in your career, let's have a look at a couple of cards around how this energy, where I think you are misunderstood because you are very, very successful in whatever you do. But I think that people think it's, this side of you is a bit of a performance. They like it, but it's a bit of a performance. So let's see what that does around your career. Opportunity. And compromise. Okay, so I think opportunity is picking up the Seven of Cups. There will be opportunities that come to you because you are recognised, as I say, for being very close to what it is that you want to be seen as. It's just a matter of degree and intent, I think. That's the only real dissonance operating. But it will require some compromise of expectations, I think, in some way, both about relationships and also around your career. You may need to make a decision if you are going to really achieve what you want without being misunderstood, to do a collaboration rather than be a leader, for instance. I think you're kind of born to be a leader in this area, but to really pursue it in whatever form you want to pursue it and in whatever way you want to pursue it around your career, there may be compromises necessary, and an opportunity comes that allows you to do that. Okay, so as I say, I don't feel there's a huge issue here. It's just an issue about whether you're being understood for what you're really trying to do and how you calibrate your leadership in all of this and the way that you connect to people, how not to intimidate people when you're really trying to be inclusive, not to sort of make them feel not in your league, so to speak. So to close out, I want to use some energy advice. So firstly, a couple of cards from the Queen of Moon Oracle, and then we're going to use the Astro Chakra cards for any last advice for you about really maximizing your first house and how you come across to be as close as possible to how you see yourself and you want to be seen. So nourishment and darkness. Okay. So I think that's got an interesting dual message. I think that it is saying that how you nourish yourself and how you nourish others, in fact, how you nourish others as much as anything else, may be part of the key. Because if it appears it's just all something that makes you very successful, people will miss the point and people will feel not able to connect with you. But if you bring this from a point of nourishment, and this might be where the compromise is, that it's how you position yourself around this, then I think it leads other people out of darkness. You shine your light and lead other people out of darkness. I think with darkness there, it is saying that this dissonance is something you've been a bit blind to. And I think it's almost inevitable, Pile 1, because there is such a closeness between how you see yourself, how you want to project yourself, the things that matter to you, and how people see you. There is a really strong synergy. So that can make us a bit blind to where there is the difference. But hopefully understanding that difference and focusing on the nourishment of others, the Promethean side, but in a very warm, natural, warm way, is a way to bring this all together. So in that purpose of bringing it all together, I'm now just going to use 3 Astro Chakra cards for final messages for you, Pile 1. Okay, So we have the fifth chakra or throat chakra, which is all about communication, and that is how you express your love. So a lot of this is in your hands. A lot of this you can do just by nuancing a little bit how you communicate and how you express your feelings, and particularly to solve this issue up here, it's all within your hands. And Venus is there. There is a love nature. There is love. There is warmth in how you communicate. You are innately very individual, and it's part of your spiritual mission, crown chakra here, to bring in freedom. Freedom to be who you are, and by being who you are, to help other people to be free to who they are. So your core cause here, you're very strongly aligned to that and aligned to spirit for it. And then the love nature over here with the heart chakra has the Mars energy and compassion. So you're all about that. This is the point. This is the Promethean energy. And the sacredness of what you're trying to do. You aren't just about having a good time. You're about inclusion. You're about healing wounds for people. You're about compassion for people who have been seen as different and not of the norm in some way. You are all about that. And that's where you put your energy. But you do need to express a little bit more of your basic love nature and what you need in love, and that it's about individuality. People don't have to be like you to be free. They just have to be like themselves, if that makes sense. So, Pole 1, I hope that resonates for you. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like the video, subscribe if you haven't already done so, and if you care to share about it, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Otherwise, I hope to see you not only in future readings in general, but in the rest of this series as we go through the rest of the houses. For now, I wish you well. Welcome, Pole 2, to your reading. Sorry, I realised I didn't change the number there. You are at the right reading if you chose Pole 2. So these cards here are how you see yourself for your first house, what you're thinking that you project, what you would like to project. These are how it is coming across at the moment now. And so what we're going to be looking at is where there are synergies and where there are differences. And, you know, in the case of either, where they help or they challenge what you're trying to achieve. So over here in how you see yourself, you are a natural born leader. You are very, very powerful, but you are not. You come from a different place. You are not like kind of your typical CEO of a company. You may well be a CEO of a company at some stage in your life or now, but that's not really where you come from, and it's not how you want to project yourself. You want to project yourself as very powerful in dealing with the things and the rules and the structures in life that are no longer working in some way, particularly fighting power. You could very well be a political activist or have that sense, like a fire in your belly, quite literally with Sekhmet, to deal with power, burn away what isn't working, and to take leadership that is compassionate. This is a very interesting, because you're rebellious. You do not like structures that are not working. And with Medusa, you will stare down the darkness really, really with sanguinity. You are very comfortable with dealing with the darker side of things, but in transmuting it and reducing it and burning it away, because you come from compassion. So you're an interesting combination, Pole 2, of what they call a servant leader, which is a leader who is there for others, that is there to enable the team, to free them in many ways to be true to who they are, to get rid of and stare down any of the opposition, to facilitate what is good in some way in your career. And in relationships, you would be sort of someone who was compassionate within friendships and love relationships, but kind of demanding in a way. You have a very strong idea about what people should be, and you want people to be authentic. You would not tolerate people pretending to you to be something that they're not. Hypocrisy would drive you bonkers, whereas you would be very compassionate for honesty and so forth. But you could be a little bit intimidating. I think the sort of energies around this could be Scorpio, could be Aries, potentially Capricorn. You sort of feel like somebody who is a revolutionary and evolutionary leader who's coming from a very good place, but who is a bit scary, to be honest, and doesn't take any prisoners. Now, what is similar in the way you're coming across, there's a couple of things. Firstly, the compassion. People do feel the compassion. They see you as someone who gives care to others. This, again, as I say, is a bit like the servant leader concept. Regardless of whether you're a manager or a leader, there is a sense that people get from you that is caring, and that gives them hope. Like, you look so strong, and people sort of really rely on that. It gives hope. I think they see you as someone who is either very well known or going to be very well known for this and able to bring abundance in because of a kind of wildness of spirit. So the Sekhmet connects to the wildling, the compassion links to the caregiver, and then I think that the famous and sort of the hope energy is kind of connected to the Zeus and Medusa. But I think the difference is that people are focusing more on what you can bring them and the abundance and the hope that you give. So this feels like, as I say, a servant leader, major organisation, political activist, something like that, that brooks no opposition, takes no prisoners, but is working from a very good place to bring about evolution or revolution. And it's true of you, but what people really experience of you is abundance, hope, the sense that they could be in safe hands and that it is okay to have that freedom and so forth. So it's the difference between, as I say, a leader and it almost feels like a motivational speaker or something like that, someone who is seen, who's up on the stage, who gives other people the sense of power and so forth. And it comes from your own legitimate power. But you know, you kind of set people free. Some of them may, though, feel that they can't quite keep up with you or that you seem a little bit wild or crazy sometimes. So, but I think there's sort of fame in that connects. I think in some ways you're given license for that, either because you are on some sort of a stage, as I say, like a Tony Robbins type, or because there's something about the environment you're operating in and the way that you use energy that people think, well, that's what it takes. It takes that kind of wildness. It takes that kind of strength. So there is actually quite a lot of connection. I just think that the difference is that you may be, and look, you may be comfortable with this. You may go, you know what, I actually know I'm coming from this space, but you know, if I'm not as scary as that, for most people that's fine. I think it's only that when you're in battle with people, when you are fighting the good fight, you're going to want people to see this Medusa a bit more. You're going to want people to see the rebel. You're going to want them to see Zeus. So I think this is fine for most people that you're helping and that you are supporting, but you don't want to be underestimated when you're in the battle. Though I'm just getting, actually, interestingly enough, that sometimes it is good to be a bit misunderstood and underestimated before you go into battle, because it's you know, sort of a Sun Tzu sort of thing about appearing to be something that you're not so that you can actually win by surprise. So for some of you, this may work absolutely perfectly, and you may have very much crafted the difference between what you really know is your true first house and how you're seen. But if for some of you thinking, well, the people that I battle with, if they're just thinking I'm kind of a motivational speaker and they're not taking me seriously as a leader, then that could be an issue. So, okay, let's have a look at some further astrology around it. So a couple of cards for each to see if we find out a little bit more about any dissonance between the two. Okay, this adds an interesting complexion to it. Firstly, over here, there is a need for surrendering something that is emotional. So I suspect this is picking up something. Your compassion here, I think a lot of it has come from dealing with power that was not appropriately used for you, whether that's in your workplace, whether it's at school, or whether it's in your home or in relationships. I think that you have had emotional issues. It's part of what has built the Medusa in you. It's part of what has made you about storming through and rebelling against things that are not working and so forth. The good news is you still have the compassion. I think, though, that what this is saying, that part of what you need to recognize to really fully maximize this over here is that sometimes you don't have to be Zeus. Keep that, release control of the universe, relax sometimes. You don't always have to be eternally vigilant. You can use that power when you need it because it's in you, but in fact, this is in fact a better way for you to be seen. This is something that's going to draw love to you, real love with Venus, and it's going to help with whatever kind of revolution you're doing, this gentler feeling, because this is a bit gentler and more aspirational, whereas this is more the battler, this is more the aspirational. That actually unleashes Uranus more. So I think that Spirit is trying to say, don't worry too much that you don't come across quite as Zeus with the Medusa underneath. You can bring that out of your arsenal when you need to, but for the most part, you're going to achieve much more of what you would want to achieve and be really become more known for it and be really appreciated for it more by this kind of softer, loving sort of energy. It's a better way. The caregiver is a bit better than just radical compassion, so to speak. So one of the other things that was under the tarot card to bring you here were 2 cards from the Stories Oracle, which is a oracle of constellations, and each have a question. So in this part of the reading, the idea was for questions that might help you in making the bridge between how you see yourself and then, or want to be projected potentially, and how you are actually being seen. So the first one is Taurus, and it says, how does your rage imprison you? This one comes up quite often in readings. I think that quite a few people who come to my readings may have issues, potentially, as showing here, from the past that you need to release because they're holding you back more than you know. And certainly it fits with this because it's like it is a bit of a rage energy combining Medusa and Zeus and Sekhmet and to some degree the rebel. It may say that many of the battles that you've had to have and that have given you this steel, because you definitely have steel in you, they have passed. It's time to let those go. There's what you've learned is going to take you to a much more accepted and abundant sort of environment. The second question is from Capricornius, and it says, what if that magic you were looking for was in the work you were avoiding? Okay, so that's an interesting question. I think, as I say, there's something aspirational, motivational about this. There's a battle here. I do think that Spirit might be asking you to think about whether it's time to lay down the sword, so to speak, and pick up the microphone. Like, is there something like that going on for you that is worth thinking about in whatever aspect of your life it is? It is interesting that the bridges are both earth signs. It could suggest that you are an earth sign in your first house. It might also suggest the exact opposite, and that it is a lack of earth around the first house and so forth that needs to be balanced, like the material outcomes, thinking about it's not all in the kind of fiery rage, it's more, or even in the hope, the watery hope, it's sort of like in what can really be achieved on a material level potentially. Okay. And it's interesting that happened too, because of course pile 2 is the pile that had the pentacle. So you were drawn to this in some way. If you don't know that you have an earth sign in your first house, then you were drawn to this for a reason, I think, because Spirit does want you to think about that, the material outcomes. So let's get to that. I'm going to use the tarot 3 cards for each of 3 areas. The first is how generally your first house is operating. The second is how it's operating for love relationships. And the third is how it's operating for career or vocation. So this is to get a little bit more practical detail on how this is playing out. Okay, so generally, shuffle again for love relationships. And then we'll have a look at career and vocation. Okay, so this is very much you're living a lot of this out in career and vocation. If you aren't already, it's something you're studying towards, you're going to be very successful in. You are going to be very successful in your career if you aren't already, and I think many of you are. So that's picking up the Zeus energy, it's picking up the kind of aspirational, sort of motivational energy over in how you're coming across and so forth. So I might talk about that first and then talk about these. So in your career, there looks like there's a new opportunity coming for you, a new position, a new business, a new financial boost, a bonus, something like that. There's a blessing around your career, and it's coming from, obviously, this sort of abundance energy and the hope and so forth around it that you bring. You are able to move very rapidly towards whatever you need around a career. And it's more because people see you as aspirational than that they're afraid of you. Because here we have the star. So your big strength in your career is this motivational side of things. You do, as I say, you are made of steel. Like you're you would be a scary opponent if you were an opponent. But I just feel like certainly in your career at this point, that's not where you're going to get the acceleration. It is in fact, how you're coming across at the moment, which is good news. It is in the example that you're showing that is aspirational and motivational and so forth. And it really is going to potentially bring some real money and so forth in for you. On the relationship side, however, it looks like you've been neglecting it. So if you're in a relationship, you're not focusing as much on it because you're focusing on the cause and on inspiring others. But I think that many of you have not really focused communication or even your thinking on a relationship at the moment. You look like you're very focused either on study towards a career or on your career or on your message in some way. If you are in a relationship, there is a risk that you're not putting enough effort into it and not enough communication into it. It'll be interesting to see what comes up when we pull a couple of oracles around this. It could mean that the closest people to you feel you belong to everybody else, but you're not there for them. So it may be just something to think about. But I think for many of you, it just might be that you're not really focusing on that at the moment, which is fine if that's the case. You don't have to focus on a love relationship at all times. In general, your own compassion sometimes ties you up a bit with the Eight of Swords, but you have built something from it. So again, it's more your compassion and your kind of innate business sense, I think, and a bit of the rebellion, because I think that's for something new, that has brought you to here than it is whatever battles you've been fighting. As I said, like, it's great to know that you have that sort of capacity to deal with conflict and to scare the pants off anybody if you had to, but that's not really where you're building. It's more this sort of compassion and how that sort of then comes out as being something that makes people feel confident in some way. Okay, so I'm going to pull a couple of cards, oracle cards for each of these, just to get a little bit more detail. So firstly, around generally how you're coming across from your first house. Okay, that's interesting. We've got 2 places. So this could mean that many of you come from these areas, or you may find these areas are important for your career or your message in some way, or it might be that they are lucky places for you. And we're doing an astrology reading here, and so it's worth mentioning that you can, certain astrologers will do a thing called astrocartography, which is looking at your natal chart in different places in the world. So this could be pointing to something like that. So Africa, South America, those sorts of areas of the world may have a key in some way, or it may be that they're examples of regimes or challenges for people, in terms of having the material comforts or whatever it might be, that are part of what fires you up. They're like causes that you might take. And it might be a bit of a clue there too, that in your immediate day-to-day, you are aspirational, but you may, because I think you will make money, I think you may become a bit of a philanthropist. So it might be that there's something like that connected to that as well, if you're not already connected to those areas. Okay, let's have a look at relationship energy using the Heart Code Oracle's relationship deck for a little bit more information on this kind of like suppressed or off to the side energy at the moment about how you're coming across for love relationships. So firstly, we have validation. Okay, and I'll shuffle for one more. And decision. Okay, what I'm getting from that, because I do have a sense with this that it is saying that you are a bit detached from close relationships. It's either that you don't want to have your validation coming from that. You want to keep the decisions about what you're doing for yourself. So it could be that you've been in a close relationship that didn't really understand what you were trying to do and the focus of what you were trying to do. Or it may even have been not being validated in a relationship that has brought this steel around in some way. But there's something around that potentially about decisions. But I think in other cases, it may be to be aware this might be someone around you. So if you are in a relationship, this person may be seeking some validation from you. And if they don't get it, they may take a decision to withdraw. So if you are in a relationship at the moment and it's one that you want to stay in, maybe put a little bit of priority to spending time with them, because I just feel like there's an issue of ego and literally validation, and on it hangs a decision in some way. So I'm also going to look at career down here as well for you. So a couple of cards from the Heart Code Oracle career deck for what's going on here, because there's a lot of promise around here, but let's see if there's anything to nuance that Spirit would like you to know. So firstly, we have success. That's been pretty obvious. I think Spirit's been very clear about career, but we'll ask for one more card in case there's sort of any other sort of advice around how to get that success. And we have bridge. Okay. So I think that Spirit is saying here, literally build the bridge between these two. Really think about those questions. I think that's very important. How does your rage imprison you? And the other question for Capricorn, which I've forgotten, so I'll just read out again. What if that magic you were looking for was in the work you were avoiding? So yeah, I think that there's something in the bridge. I think that Spirit is saying success is there for you, but to really, really maximize it and get what you want out of it, think about those questions. Don't get stuck in old rage and old battles, and think about what you might be avoiding because of that you could actually manifest more in terms of motivating others and getting, I think, your reputation built up, which I think it's destined to do. Okay, so to close out, I want a couple of other oracles. I'm using firstly the Queen of the Moon Oracle for some last energetic advice about things that you can do, and then we'll use the Astro Chakra cards to finish the reading. So, Queen of the Moon. Hunger, okay. And gratitude. Okay, so I think part of this Zeus sort of Medusa energy, there is a hunger that you are trying to satiate. If there's something about rage from the past, somewhere where maybe you weren't validated, where you were oppressed in some way, where you had to burn all out before you to rebel and become who you are. And it has given you a hunger for the fight. But this is saying that gratitude is actually more powerful. Even gratitude for the rage and the things before, because it showed you how strong you are. You are exceptionally strong. But because of that, you can be the steel hand and the steel hand and the velvet glove. So you can be the softer energy and show the value of gratitude and of bringing in abundance and hope. You can be that kind of a beacon, and that is okay. You don't need to scare people anymore. I think you might have had a point in your life where you needed to. Or this is the play of your life. It may be that you are still going through the battles, but you should be heading towards that aspirational gratitude space. Okay, so to finish off, I'm just going to use 3 Astro Chakra cards for you. Creativity, survival, and power. Okay, all right. So part of the bridge for you, I think, is that there are creative options for you that uses the wisdom that you've learnt in what you've gone through, what you've come from. And it is about honesty and being honest with yourself, that you don't always have to be in a battle. It isn't always, there's survival instincts around this. That's partly why this has occurred. There's a reason that you've built this degree of strength. And it's very emotional to you. You do need to feel secure, but it's saying security comes through the power that comes from respect, and people respect your positivity. So it is not a weakness to be into abundance and hope and positivity. As I say, you can always call on the steel when you need it, but for the most part, it's how inspirational you are that commands the respect. That will make you feel more secure in what you do, and you will feel more and more able to be honest about everything with yourself and with others with that. So I do think that this is a case where how people are seeing you is in fact what you were evolving into, and how you're seeing yourself is the one thing that could potentially hold you back a bit. There are synergies between the two, but it's maximizing what's positive in those synergies that will take you where you need to go. So I hope that resonates for you, pile 2. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like the video and subscribe. And if you care to share about it, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Otherwise, I hope to see you in future readings in general, and certainly in the future episodes of this series. Beyond that, I wish you well. Welcome, pile 3, to your reading. So these cards are about how you see yourself and you think you project to the world, or you'd like to project to the world. And these cards are about what is actually being seen by others. And we'll look at a bridge between them in terms of synthesizing what is similar or different between the two, and the advice of spirit around that. So you, I think, come across as being incredibly attractive, very beautiful probably. It may be beauty that is not conventional. It's possible that it's beauty that is more clear and more understood once you are known by somebody. So though it's possible with these cards, equally you could be very much the standard beautiful for your culture. That's possible with this, but it's also possible that it's a beauty of soul that people start to see and then can't imagine as seeing you as anything other than beautiful. Very, very dexterous, very light in how you move, able to take risks. I don't think you sort of see yourself as a high roller in the sense of a gambler, but you are able to take risks because you have great confidence, because you come from a higher perspective. So White Buffalo woman was very beautiful, but she was also divine. And when people really got to know that and understand the relationship with it, the higher perspective of the relationship, then she was able to bring peace to things. And so I think there's something very balanced and beautiful in you. I wouldn't be at all surprised if you had Libra in the first house, or Libra strong in your chart anyway, even if it isn't in the first house, and it's then being reflected through your first house as well. Because there is something about peace, there is something about the capacity to bring balance and that kind of flexibility and adaptability. And you want people to see that you want them to see the confidence and the peace that you can bring to things, the higher perspective, and how to balance when risks need to be taken or change needs to be embraced with a dexterity and a flexibility that brings about the best possible outcome and the abundance. So you're likely in some way, whether it is that you literally become a dancer or something in the sort of performing arts, it's very beautiful, that brings people to sort of see perspectives of their culture or of their lives, or whether it's sort of something in a workplace, or whether it's even with your friends about bringing peace and maybe balancing quite different people within your social circle to bring a higher perspective around what is in common between them. There's something like that around you. You are a bit of a risk taker. You are very dexterous. And I think this is all very true. And you do come from a higher perspective. Now, what's similar in how you're seen is you're coming across as the alchemist. People definitely think you have some sort of spiritual ability. They think that you've got some sort of telephone line through the divine or something, that you know witchy sort of things or spiritual sort of things, that you are magical in some way. And they definitely see you as beautiful as well. And again, it could be conventionally, or it might be just more from the soul. The issue that you've got, I think, Pile 3, is that you see dexterity, risk-taking, confidence, a higher perspective, balancing different viewpoints. Other people see someone who is incredibly compelling and incredibly powerful, but a little bit hard to understand or to be sure of. We have shape-shifting with Serenos there. We have the traveller, which gives a sense of movement. And we have numb here. So I think that people sometimes respond to this energy you have and this confidence you have by almost like blanking it out, because they don't know if you're there for the long haul. I think that you come across as someone who could be gone, or could change, or could decide a different way of doing things if you were sort of negotiating something and they would not be entirely sure whether or not you would flip on a dime to get the outcome, as opposed to saying sort of close to something. And certainly for many of them, and this may be particularly around personal relationships, whether you're around enough for them to really get to know you. They might think on one level that maybe you're not a shapeshifter, it's just that they see you in a variety of different sort of environments or different roles, and they're not really sure which is you, and they think that you're a bit mystical and strange. So I think that you have to balance this capacity to shapeshift over on this side, to be able to find peace, to be able to get the balance of risk and reward, to bring that higher perspective, but in a way that doesn't make people feel insecure, because I think you make people feel insecure. Not deliberately, and I think people really like you. They see you as wonderful. I think they just don't know how to be sure you're going to be there. You may very much be someone who, because of these abilities, are drawn into many different social groups, many different causes, all that sort of thing. And so it's sort of like, when do they get the time to be with you? And I think it's going to particularly show up around relationships. Maybe not so much in terms of career, because maybe a lot of this is coming out in your career, and maybe your career makes you travel and be away a lot and that kind of thing. Okay, let's have a look at some other astrological energy around this. Oh, okay. So over here, it's saying that to get the best from coming across as you want to come across, part of it is being about able to adjust, and you are able to adjust, but it's also adjust your own direction and intention and how fast you move to things. You may move towards solutions a lot faster than other people. This might be part of this energy as well too. So in some sort of a negotiation, you may sort of be 3 steps ahead. In a chess game, you might be 3 steps ahead, and it may be also making people feel kind of a little bit lost and a little bit numb in what you're doing. It could get in the way of that. But the key to clarifying that is communication. You're a very, very good communicator. That's why you're a natural peace person, really. It's your capacity to communicate, to think things through and so forth is prodigious and comes from a higher perspective. So focus on communicating your direction and why you're doing things, because you just go a bit faster than other people. Over here, also give people a little bit more sense of stability and the history of things with Saturn. It may in fact be saying you need to tell some people in your life a bit about your life. You may move so fast and so forth that you don't think about explaining where you've come from and who you are, and that might be why people are not sure who you are. So there's something about the history that you have, about expressing that in some way, and also about being able to show that you're committed, because with the new moon, you're always planting new seeds, you're always doing new things. And this would be particularly an issue around relationships, as I say. It'd be like you could meet the love of your life and you could be very committed to them, but they may think you're going to be on to the next thing. If you're not showing that commitment very clearly, if you're not communicating and you're not talking about your history and how you came to be who you are, that could be misunderstood. Okay, so also under the tarot card that you chose to come to this were a couple of cards from the Stories Oracle, which is an oracle that has constellations, but it has particular questions. So the intent of this, it were questions that Spirit would suggest you ask to bridge the difference between how you see yourself and would like to be seen and how other people are experiencing you. So the first is Cancer. What would you do for those you care for? So there, make sure. This is probably fine in career. This is probably fine in even in general, sort of like kind of not particularly close relationships. But for close relationships, make sure that people understand who you are and that they know that you have given them your commitment. That even if you are drawn in many different places, that you'll always come home, basically. And then we also have Gemini. What if judgment is just unfulfilled potential being mirrored back at us? Okay. So what they could be saying is part of the reason that this is occurring is that people who are drawn to you because you are able to find peace and so forth in contested situations, or that you're able to balance risk and you're very graceful in dealing with all the different challenges of life, might start to project their own insecurity about the capacity to do it back on you and then call you a shapeshifter and feel disconnected from you. So I think there is also an understanding, and it's probably, again, particularly around your personal relationships, of how much of this judgment is right and how much of it is an insecurity from others being projected on you, because you've got to get the balance right. We're using the Dancer energy. You need to get the balance right. Okay, so let's have a look at tarot. And I'm going to do 3 cards for 3 different areas around this. The first is around generally how you come across. The second is in relationships. And the third is in career and vocation. And this may really support some of what I've been getting from this, or it may add other nuance to it. So firstly, we'll have a look at generally. And I'll shuffle for relationships. Yeah, this is definitely impacting your relationships at the moment, I would say, pile 3. And then we will shuffle for career. Okay. So firstly, generally, it is picking up this sense that you may come across as someone who walks away, particularly if something is no longer sort of like the way you would want it emotionally and so forth. You don't look like someone, you look like someone who prefers to negotiate and find peace. You don't look like someone who wants to go into a full-on battle. In fact, you will walk away if something gets emotionally overheated. And certainly if you feel like stuff is being insincere or untrue in some way. You do come from a higher perspective, and if something is fundamentally dishonest, whether this is a relationship, whether it's something around career, whether it's a cause that you do, whatever it might be, if you feel it's fundamentally dishonest in some way, then you will just walk away from it. You do not bother with a battle that you do not think is worthwhile. And it's probably a combination of things. Like if it's not worthy, you're just going to be gone. So, and interestingly enough, with the white buffalo woman, you know, the story around her is the first person who tried to sort of get close to her and didn't respect her ended up being kind of burnt to a cinder. So you're kind of like that. You'll just burn all before you if it's not sort of something that you feel can be brought in. When you've done a risk assessment, if you don't think that it's fair, it's honest, it's something that can take a high perspective, you will walk away. You don't take on a battle that you can't win. And there is a little bit of Sun Tzu around this for you too. It's not necessarily that you're running away because of cowardice. It's a calculation. You make a calculation on this. You know, Sun Tzu in The Art of War effectively says that, you know, the people who win go into battles already that they know they've won before they even go into it. You're that sort of person. In the relationship, this is definitely, this, if it isn't already affecting your relationships, it has the potential to do it if you don't understand. If you don't understand that some of this dexterity, it could be misinterpreted. Certainly it could break up a conventional long-term relationship and take the joy out of it. With the Nine of Cups and the Ten of Cups reversed and the Hierophant reversed, it does suggest at its best with the Hierophant reversed that if you found someone who was equally unconventional, because you're a bit unconventional, then that could work out. But if you're looking for the more conventional versions of what emotional happiness is, then you'd need to shift, because you are making people feel numb. You are numbing down the emotional connection in some way. It's not what you intend to do, but it comes from the fact that people don't feel that they can be sure of the security and so forth. In your career, you are the master of the balance and the art of the incremental but positive change. You find things that are not quite becoming what they should be. You reinvest in some way that works, that has incremental change. You are not, again, it's a bit like you don't take on a battle that is just literally a lost cause in any way, or too disruptive or too damaging to anyone. You do like peace. But when you find something that is materially not working, you work out how to reinvest in it, and the slow but steady change with the Tower reversed rather than blowing everything up. You certainly would not be, if you were a leader in an organisation, you would not be someone who would go in and just throw everything up in the air and then sort of see what comes out of the debris. You would be someone who would make measured, sensible change that is about doing it peacefully and productively and so forth, and very much the risk-benefit. There's a very risk-benefit sort of energy to that. So around your career, your innate thing is perfect. The only thing, again, to know is if people feel as though you may not hang around once it's done, then if you really want that Seven of Coins to work, you need to make sure that the plans and stuff are in place to make it stay that way. And if you are going into a work yourself and you're not a leader, it could be saying that if you want to get a true career that can incrementally grow, then people need to feel you're there for the longer term. If you come across as someone who's just there, so you may come in, you know, on the gig economy, you might come in on a contract, but try and make it clear that you're there for the long term, because people may just think, well, that's what you like. You just like doing contracts or whatever. Okay, so let's have a look at some other oracle information around this. So firstly, some other oracle information around the general way that you come across. Okay, so firstly we've got camouflage, hidden, protective, tough, outdoors. So you do come across as tough, I think, and protective, but there's a lot of what you do that is hidden. This is the problem, I think. People don't really understand who you are. You haven't, I think you think it should be self-evident, but self-evident is an oxymoron in many ways. Very little is actually self-evident, particularly the things that we think are. And then we have pig, which is potentially you could have been born in the year of the pig if any of those are your birth year, but otherwise it just might be personality characteristics. The pig is very caring and generous and smart, very outgoing, but a bit impatient, a bit materialistic. So again, it's sort of like, don't go too fast for everybody. I think that might be part of the thing. It's this impatience and so forth. You are genuinely caring. That's what people need to see. That's what they're missing at the moment. And it feels like you're all flash and dazzle, but you really are caring. You really do want to bring about good outcomes, and you are going to be there for however long, whether it's in work or whatever that is necessary. But I think particularly around love relationships, there is a disconnect in how you're coming across at the moment. So moving to love relationships, let's see, using the Heart Code Oracles, a couple of cards to show how that's playing out at the moment. So we have criticism, and validation. Okay. So if you are in a relationship and you are resonating to the sense that maybe the person you're with is feeling insecure, you may be hearing it through critique of you, or you may find that what happens is they feel numb because they feel that they can't pin you down, and therefore they're not validated and they feel criticised in some way. So it really depends on whether or not you're being criticised now because of the fact that what you're trying to do and what you're trying to achieve is not validated, or that people feel unvalidated around you, or it could be that other people feel criticised by you by implication of the fact that your focus isn't on them, it's on something else. So there's something around that. This has got to do with the ego stuff about being seen and heard and understood, and it goes both ways, pile 3, because I think you may need to make sure that you're understood so that your very good intentions are understood, but equally you need to make sure you're listening and hearing the people closest to you, and that they're not just a kind of a problem to be solved or a risk to be managed. Okay, and then down in career, let's see what energy is around that for you. And if you're studying or something, this is, heading towards your career. So we have promotion. Okay, that's good. And we have victory. Yeah, career's fine. Career's fine. I think the only thing that you need to do is make sure that if you're in an organisation or something, particularly if you are seeking a promotion, that people know that you're there for the longer term, that you're an investment that the organisation can make. I think that's the only thing that you need to make sure, the only dissonance between the two. It may be literally that some of you, promotion may require a lot more travel, which then could have a flow-on effect to relationships, I'm getting. So it could be that through a promotion and through victory at work, this really comes into the fore, and you really have to think about, use those skills about thinking about peace and the higher perspective and what you really care about people to make sure that you don't end up in a lost situation around the love relationships in your life. Okay, so to finish off pile 3, I want to use the Queen of the Moon Oracle for some energetic advice, and then the Astro Chakra cards to bring it all together. So we have surrender and peace. Okay, well, you're all about peace, but surrender is interesting. Maybe this is really pointing to the higher consciousness, and it is part of you, but maybe what it is saying is that capacity to risk manage and to do the peace work and to do the dance and all that sort of thing has maybe got in the way of the higher perspective. So part of what may bring all of this more into balance and start to project to others more of what you're trying to project, which isn't entirely not working, but it's just making people insecure. Part of it may be to bring peace to others, and what you're trying to do in general in peace is to surrender back to your higher perspective. Okay, so let's use the Astro Chakra cards to close this out. Okay, all right. So firstly, there's a creative response to this. There's a creative way through making that connection, and it's emotional. It is to connect your emotions. I think actually maybe that's one of the key things around all this. It feels as though you're a little bit disconnected from your emotions, and other people pick that up then, therefore as being detached and so forth. But in actual fact, your creative instinct comes from your emotions, and reconnecting back to those, maybe surrendering to your emotions and the higher perspective that brings about the right instincts to shift this, because it's like you've almost sublimated a lot of that into career or into peacekeeping with others rather than into all aspects in your life. And it's interesting because then you've used your intuition because of your individuality to detached, and that's an issue. But we've got the third eye chakra twice, and we've also got Neptune there in surrender. So we've got surrender again. So this is really saying that I think there is a little bit of a need to surrender some of your individuality, your sense of standing apart, and to go more into the inspiration and how you can lead others with you, and your emotions. It's you have somehow detached a bit from your emotions and from what is inspirational in you. And yes, that has made you very successful and very individual, but not necessarily as connected as I think that you would like to be. So I think that's the key for you, pile 3. I hope that resonates for you. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like the video and subscribe. And if you know what this relates to, I'd love to hear about it in the comments. Beyond that, I hope to see you in future readings in general, and certainly in the future episodes of this series. And I wish you well. Welcome, pile 4, to your reading. So these cards here that I'm just moving are how you see yourself and how you think your first house works, or you would like your first house to work. And then this is how it's coming across to others. And so we'll be having a look at what's similar, what sort of carries over between both, and it has synthesis, and what's different that might be challenging or provide opportunities and so forth. And then we're going to use some cards that were also under the tarot card that you chose to come here to look at, things to bridge those sorts of energies. So there's something mysterious about you. I wouldn't be surprised if you had Scorpio or Pisces in the first house, possibly Cancer. I feel like it's a water sign. I think there's a reason you came to the Cups one. If not, then there's a strong water and the underneath energy to this. If you don't have Scorpio or Pisces in the first house, you may have it in the 12th, and that there's a kind of Persephone-esque type feeling over there that could also indicate that. In any case, how you see yourself, I think that there is something naturally regal and a bit sort of majestic about you that draws a lot of people in. There's a lot of charisma, there's a lot of warmth. You bring in a lot of admirers, and probably always have. Probably even from when you're a child, you're probably a very precocious, attractive child to other people. Just it's very energetic and pretty potentially, or handsome, whatever. And because of that, you're aware of that. You've actually had to do some healing because of it. I think that sometimes that has been a little bit dismaying to you, and you've had to make sacrifices because of it. You may in fact have drawn in quite a bit of jealousy around that, and you've had to put boundaries in. So you may be the sort of person who, in the way that you come across in the world, draw in frenemies, draw in people who are drawn to your natural compassion and healing and so forth, but kind of want to be you in a way, and call upon you to sacrifice all the time. It's like you have to sacrifice some of your light to have boundaries to keep yourself safe, because there's just it's a bit like I talked about in the introduction when I said charismatic people often have weird relationships because people project so much need on them beyond just whatever the interaction is. There's a bit of that kind of energy around you. And I think for you, you've worked out how to present a particular image that keeps your healing within, and whatever sacrifice that you do within, so that the boundaries are important. You're very, very private about who you are and who you love and who you're with and all that kind of thing. Over here, you're very mysterious. As a result of that, you're very mysterious. People do see you as very wise. So whatever you have gone through, whatever sacrifice that you've done, whatever healing you've been through, whatever boundaries you've had to put up, it's coming across here with Artemis, with individuation and sharing wisdom. I think people are drawn to you because they feel like you know something about the shadow, you know something about the underworld with Hades there, and yet you've still retained a kind of an innocence and a youthfulness, even though you're almost wise beyond your years. But they find you mysterious, they find you difficult to get close to with the introvert and so forth. But you're coming across here as a combination of maybe Scorpio and maybe Virgo or maybe Aquarius potentially with Artemis. There's sort of like both these sort of air sign intelligence there, and Virgo, the kind of material sort of wisdom and the sort of almost virginal feeling around it. Which is not to say that you haven't had relationships or anything like that, but there's something you come across as a sort of weird mix between the sort of the Persephone shamanic sort of deep wisdom and an innocence that somehow connects to a lot of intelligence. So people think you have a secret. They're very fascinated by you. They think that there's a secret. And this may be part of the admiration that you've drawn. You may be someone who's often drawn people to you because they're kind of fascinated by you, and you feel a bit overwhelmed by that sometimes. You need the boundaries and so forth. And people don't necessarily understand that some of whatever this wisdom is and this capacity to be in the depths, you have been in the depths. You've gone through something, like whether it's in your childhood or school, or you've gone through some sort of health issue that you've had to deal with, or there's something, or it could even be in a past life. But if it is, it's very fresh in your memory. You really feel that you've had to give up something, give up some of your almost royal stature for the healing and the boundaries that you need, and other people are just fascinated by it. So the challenge of this, I think, is that people are looking to get under the surface and you don't necessarily want them to. So let's have a look at some other astrology energy around it for you. Okay. See, it's interesting. I'm going to go over here first. It's interesting the first house has come out here because we're talking about the first house. So it really indicates the first house in your chart's very important. It's important in everybody's chart, but for you it's particularly important. It holds the key to some of the mystery of yourself, to others and also to yourself. But you are not seen clearly. You may in fact have Neptune in the first house. Neptune in the first house could give a degree of glamour, like you might be very glamorous, and there is something darkly glamorous about this energy over here. Or it could be just that people just cannot get a fix on you. That there's something, and it is fascinating. And if you don't have Neptune in the first house, and I think Neptune's probably strongly aspected in some way to your first house, because it's certainly confirming that people feel that you're a mystery. People don't feel that they can fully understand who you are, and they're just really drawn to it. But they put a lot of it down to you maybe being shy, which it could work for you, because that might help you have the boundaries. Because over here, you're a force to be reckoned with. You really are a queen. You are, the Capricorn is the powers of the world, and Mars is the sort of energy to have that. It's like maybe you gave up some power. Maybe you gave up some power for love, potentially. And a great romantic sort of storyline around you, and either maybe it didn't work out, or if it has worked out, you've had to have boundaries because people are too drawn to that. People want to know about it in some way or see you as a way through to the power. That's a possibility. It may be that you sacrificed love for power as well too, but you need boundaries. But there's a sacrifice in there, and it's got to do with power and status and so forth, and a kind of regal sense, and you've had to heal from it. But it's created this mythos around you. You are very fascinating to people, but very unclear. So the Stories Oracle was also under the tarot card that brought you to this reading, and it's a deck that has constellations and a particular question with each constellation. So the idea here is questions that Spirit thinks are useful for you to ask to bridge the difference here. If you want to bridge it, you might be fine that they find you mysterious. You might think that gives me the boundaries that I want, in which case, simple. But if you want to be a little bit more clearly understood for the sacrifice that you've done and why you have your boundaries, and not to be just kind of this strange, glamorous creature that keeps drawing people to you that don't understand you, then these questions may help. So the first one is for Virgo, and it says, what if you were sovereign unto yourself? So here you are. But you've sacrificed some of that for some reason. For love, for other people, for how you come across. It's why people find you fascinating. They sense the power, but you've kind of put a lid on it for some reason. And it's interesting that I felt Virgo was connected to this individuation and this sort of like wisdom element of Artemis. The other question is for Libra, and it's, what if you honoured that some things are outside of your control? Okay. So you are naturally a ruler. You are naturally able to to get what you need in the world. You have made some sacrifice, and maybe that was something that was out of your control. You had to do that to get the boundaries that you needed and to heal in some way. But sometimes things are outside of your control, and I think some of what's outside of your control is the degree of fascination that you exert on other people. You definitely are one of those people, like with charisma or something like that, that you are going to find in your life have some strange reactions to you. It just goes with the territory. Okay, so let's use the tarot, and I'm going to put down 3 cards for generally how your first house is operating in love relationships and then in career. Okay, so firstly around general, you might have noticed, I'm not sure whether it was, I don't know where my hand was in relation to this screen when I was dealing these out, but I almost wanted to turn the Queen of Cups around, but I didn't. It was come out as reverse, so I will do that. But I think that that's a bit of a sign. There is a push from Spirit in a way that in general that you become more back in touch with the Queen of Cups and your emotional authenticity and what you want emotionally. Because what I'm seeing here is that you have this sacrifice, this pain has been around relationship, I think, around the juggling of relationship and career, or power and relationship. There has been a genuine pain, this sacrifice. It's not been easy, and you're probably not completely healed yet. So you probably still need your boundaries, but the aim should be, I think, for this Queen to become the Queen of Cups. And she is emotionally happy and emotionally clear and emotionally authentic. At some point, I think, part 4, you will get to the stage where you can be a little bit more open and let down your guard a bit. I don't think you're there yet, but I think that's where you're meant to be heading. And I think that Spirit is sort of saying, yeah, it's tilting towards that. That's why I felt almost the need to turn it around. But it is saying you're not there yet. There's still some healing to do, and you don't have to be too hard on yourself about this. Don't make any material decisions until you're through that process. Over here around relationships, if you are in a relationship, then you probably find it hard work. You feel like you have to have the same conversations over and over and over, and it's never over. So there's certainly a sense, again, of maybe someone that's come into the glamour doesn't fully understand you, and you're constantly feeling like you're having to answer to something. If you're not in a relationship, it may be because you've been in ones like that, where you constantly had to explain yourself. Or you're connected to someone who's a long way away from you. You're connected through electronic means, and that's sort of hard work, and it's hard work to be seen clearly. I mean, you really do have a struggle to be seen clearly because, as I say, there's so much glamour around you. But I just have this sort of sense of like endless conversations and debates around relationships that never seem to resolve and are really hard work. And again, it's got to do with what is being projected out here. It's a very complex image that's being projected out here. So we will look at what Spirit is suggesting with Oracle cards to help you get past that and to be able to turn that card around and maybe move past the hard work associated with it. It is very likely for many of the people who have come to this reading that the sacrifice, although I think it has a very strong emotional impact, is been in something to do with career or vocation. You know, it's something to do with who you are in the world. And it's been to free yourself from, I think, quite an oppressive force. And it was dramatic. So this could have been leaving a really controlling relationship. It could have been, you know, that spilled over into how you could have a career, like whether you could ever leave the house, for instance, or what career you were allowed to have, you know, like a very strong, potentially paternal sort of view on that. Or it could be a relationship within a workplace where the power was being abused. But you have freed yourself from it, but it's been dramatic. This is part of what you're healing. It's also possible, I'm getting that for some of you, there may have been a relationship that was both a love relationship and a work relationship, and it brought all of this up. And that's why there's so much healing to happen and so forth. And that's why there was a sacrifice associated with it. And it may not be completely resolved if that's the case. So that's quite specific. It's not going to be everybody, but I think for some there may be a connection between both the sort of love life and the kind of general sort of healing you need and your career. But for others, it's like you've sacrificed some power, some position or whatever. But the worst is over. The worst is actually over, and Spirit wants you to know that. You can start to move forward now. You can start to properly heal with confidence. Okay, so let's use some oracles to get a little bit more information. Firstly, on the general way that you're coming across. Okay, so here's another sign of this attractiveness. You're very attractive, there's something pretty or handsome about you, and people really are drawn to that, and they think that's a very sweet, loving sort of energy. This is part of what they're glamorizing over here, and part of why you get the admirers under there, but also why you need the boundaries. You may be born in the year of the rat. That might be important to you if any of those are your birth year. Otherwise, the sort of personality aspects of the rat are ambitious. So you are ambitious, charming, resourceful, sometimes critical, sometimes frugal. So some of the boundaries that you have around all of this, some people may find, sometimes you're very much in your head and other times you seem to be very mysterious and in your emotions or something. So there could be that kind of push-pull energy around the rat. But certainly it may be suggesting that re-emerging your ambition is fine because you have the resources that you need. You are able to, and you're also able to, with the talkative side of rat, sort of like talk through, and a lot of this is about talking, resolve issues through communication. Okay, so let's get heart code oracles for the relationship, where you're at with that at the moment, as it pertains to how you're coming across in your first house. So we've got love from beyond, okay, and consequences. Oh, wow. Okay, so firstly, some of this may be that sense with the world, like it might be love from beyond, might not be from the great beyond, but might be someone who's far away. That might be, some of you may respond to that you may be in a long distance relationship, which is making clarity of how you're seen harder and communication harder, and that has some consequences. For others of you, there could even be some sort of spirit guide or past person in your life or whatever who is literally loving you from beyond and is watching over the consequences of that. I am getting for some that is great and is something that will help you heal. And I'm getting for some, if that's true, it may be almost a bit of a spanner in the works, like someone who's almost a bit jealous, the consequences of if you were seen clearly. So there's interesting energy around that. If you do feel it's the latter, then I think, maybe sort of meditating on releasing that person with love would be helpful. Because of that Hades thing, there's sort of that potential of that kind of holding on from beyond and so forth. And it'll be very specific. You'll know if it fits you or not. I don't feel like it's meant malefically, but it might be a little bit, as I say, jealous or possessive. And I think it's just releasing those bonds. It might be still a little bit of this energy down here, and it may have been connected somehow to a career or a vocation or study or something like that. Okay, so let's look at the career, vocation, study, those sorts of things. Okay, we've got promotion and success. That's interesting. I think those two cards, and I just shuffled them, and I'd sort of like put them in separately when I sort of got ready for this reading. That came up in something else. So there could be someone who's come to two readings, and there's maybe two aspects of things you need to be aware of, if that's the case. If not, then, as I said, the worst is over. You will be able to reestablish yourself as the queen, the person who's the leader and so forth, and your intelligence and a bit of your mystery in a way, and your capacity to rise phoenix-like from the ashes may be part of what brings around this success. You're certainly meant to have career success, and that's supposed to be part of how you're seen in the world. But I think for you, it's more around personal relationships and the glamour that you give, because there's something glamorous about you, glamorous and charismatic, and understanding how that impacts things. I think that is the key for you. Okay, so to finish off, I want to use the Queen of Moon Oracle and the Astro Chakra cards. So firstly, a couple of cards around energies to help you, pile 4. We have darkness and pleasure. Okay, now that's really interesting given that you had Hades over here. There is a side of you, pile 4, that does kind of like the mysterious. Nothing wrong with that. As I say, there's something scorpionic, there's something like Persephone. And Persephone, ate the pomegranate, and so kind of had to keep returning to the underworld. And in certain sort of, poems and stuff around all of that, she fell in love with Hades, in fact. So there's a little bit of the side of you that gets pleasure from the glamour and from being mysterious. And I think Spirit is saying that's fine. I think it's just an issue of making sure you do have the boundaries that you have, and that when you want to have a close relationship, that you clear the air, that you really, really make it clear who you are, that you use your communication skills to do that and so forth, and that you live more into the Queen of Cups the right way up, because otherwise you may find, and that kind of sense of being able to be in the underworld, as I say, may draw people in, but you may find that it has a bit of a chilling effect on relationships that you want to be close to. All right, so to finish up, we'll use the Astro Chakra cards. We've got Sacral Chakra, the Crown Chakra, and the Heart Chakra. Okay, there's a lot of power in those cards. Doesn't surprise me. There's a lot of power in you. There is something creative. You create yourself with the sun there. Creativity is part of who you are, but you literally create yourself. And that's why there's this glamour around you. Certainly if you go into a career or something like that requires glamour and to be able to wear a mask and everything like theatre or drama or influencing, then it's actually brilliant that you can do that, because it helps you keep your boundaries. So don't pull away from that if that actually is what works for you. Only be careful about how it impacts your most close personal relationships. But you are creating yourself. You are a work in progress. And don't feel you have to sacrifice everything. We went through something, I would say, but that doesn't have to define you. You can connect through the Crown Chakra to your spiritual purpose, to the higher purpose beyond what you're doing and so forth. And that gives you the energy to move forward and brings in the accomplishment. It's partly that. There's a connection to the Crown Chakra and to your purpose on a spiritual level, connected to your career success, I think. And then in terms of love, there's maybe, see, this is interesting, it's Uranus with reconnecting. So for some of you, this may be about a relationship that you repair. And so love from beyond might be love from another time that you can actually repair, or it could be a karmic sort of situation or a twin flame sort of situation, or it could be reconnecting back with who you truly are again, so that again, once you come to love, that individuality is used to connect, not to separate, if that makes sense, not to keep the boundaries up. So you've got a complex first house, pile 4. And it has a lot of strength and a lot of, as I say, glamour, charisma, a lot of things going for it, to be frank. But you have gone through something. You've suffered something in this life or another, but I think most of you in this life. And I think it has made you a little bit more hidden than you need to be. Like just getting that balance a little bit more right, and using the glamour when it works for you, and being very authentic and very much open communication when you want to have those close relationships. And you should be fine. But don't feel anything is bad in enjoying some of the mystery and the underworld and all of that kind of thing, because it's part of who you are, and it's fine. So I hope that resonates for you, pile 4. I hope you enjoyed the reading. If so, please like the video and subscribe. And if you have any comments on this that you'd like to share, I'd love to read them in the comments. Beyond that, I hope to see you in other future readings in general, but certainly in others in this series if you've enjoyed this one. And beyond that, again, I wish you well.